more exciting. We've got too much fun things. But if we can't go away this year, we will go to the seaside in England and it will be great.
Absolutely. We absolutely will.
But yes, so I have to say, how amazing was last month's box? I was a bit worried that after that Islay themed special edition that we were going to, you know, come down to earth with a bit of a bump. But no, I think the whiskies we've got this evening are extraordinary and I'm so excited to taste them.
Not up pour and sip. We're definitely not coming down with a bump. We're elevating even more. Now the Islay box was incredible, and I feel like we may have kind of changed a few people's opinions maybe on peated whiskey as well, because I remember reading so many of you guys were just like, I never really liked peated whiskey before, and now I one of these drams or two of these drams have really changed my mind. So that is kind of what we're here to do. So we're really pleased that that's happened for you guys.
Absolutely. And I feel like this evening we've even got some comments coming already. So Ian, Jambo Rain, particularly looking forward to the bees tonight. I've not tried either distillery before. This is what it's literally all about with Pour and Sip. We're sharing drams that we love, stuff that, you know, you've maybe seen around or things that we've loved for a long time. I think Glenfarclas, the third dram, would be an example of that this evening. It's a distillery that I genuinely really adore. But then we've got newness as well, discovery drams. It's all about, you know, just tasting together, discovering something new, challenging your palates and just having a great time.
Alistair Tapp is evening all from Cumbria. Looking forward to this one after skipping last month's ashtray. So I see talking about Islay whiskey as an ashtray, which isn't a bad a comparison. But yeah, obviously we couldn't change Alistair's opinion, but that's not a problem. Your Uncle Vanya, welcome back, your Uncle Vanya, absolute regular for us. Hi, Pour and Sip, you guys, love heart. You've done it again. Amazing box. Yeah, this is what we're saying. Stuart McGregor. Hi from Dundee. First time live with you guys. Yes, we love newbies and we'll go very easy on you.
Yes, and if you are new, honestly, welcome to the party. I keep saying it, but it's so great to have you here. We are going to have a live tasting, obviously. That's why we're here. So make sure you've got your drams. Make sure you've got your tasting glasses. If you are new, they're like under the little bit in your box. You might have to dig them out. You may have missed them. You should also have, if you're new, your How to Taste Whiskey card. So if this is all new to you, you're like, do I gulp it? How do I nose it? What the hell are all these tasting notes coming through? Have a read of that. And honestly, there are no wrong answers. We want to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the whiskies. It's all incredibly exciting. And yeah, your tasting notes as well. You'll be fine. You're in safe hands.
You'll be fine. Green tea is green man after my heart. You didn't change my mind about peated whiskey. Love it. Yeah, same here. Definitely. If anything, I think we reinforced people's opinions of how good peated whiskey is, as well as changing some people's opinions.
Exactly. And tonight we're going, well, we're staying in Scotland, so that's it. We've got 3 Scotch whiskies. We're going to taste Bladnoch first of all, and we've got a special guest from the distillery, Nick, going to come and have a chat with us. So if you've got any questions about whiskey making, about Bladnoch, about I mean, it's a really interesting distillery. It's got really fascinating past. It's had periods of closure, and how it's been brought back to life is just fabulous. So any questions along those lines, pop them in the comments box. Then we're going to have a chat about Balblair. You're going to sort of lead us on that one, Andy, which is another really cool distillery. And then Glenfarclas, last of all, which is, as I mentioned earlier, like a bit of a personal favourite.
Last but definitely not least, Lawrence Collins, first visit as well. Looking forward to the tasting. Welcome, Lawrence. And like we said before, welcome to everyone who's new. If you are new, please do not be scared to post your comments or your questions or your tasting notes. This is a total open community, so we love reading your tasting notes. They're what makes the tastings so special, obviously, apart from me and Christy, and the wonderful guests we get as well. But it really does kind of really change reading all your amazing tasting notes. And like everyone has said, all our guests have said, what amazing tasting notes you guys have all been sending. So keep it up. But yeah, do not be scared to post them.
Yeah, get involved, ask questions. There is no such thing as a silly question. This is about having fun, trying some stuff, and yeah, I can't wait. So I guess on that note, we should probably crack on. So we've got 3 drams to get through, and we are going to bring Nick in. Let's see if he's there. Hi, Nick. How are you doing?
Good evening. How are you?
Really well, thanks. How are you? How was your day?
It's been very well. It's finishing on a belting sunny Scottish day. After waking up this morning, it was raining sideways, so it's a good end to the day with a good dram.
As you said to us earlier, we need the rain, otherwise we won't have any whiskey in the future.
Yeah, sun's great for everybody, apart from distilleries. If it doesn't rain for too long, then we get slightly twitchy because the rivers are a bit low. So great to get both.
And the worst thing about a lack of water supply for everybody would be a lack of whiskey. That is the absolute worst thing that could possibly happen.
Exactly.
Keep the whiskey flowing.
So keep doing the rain dances. That's the key, Rick. Keep doing it.
I want it to rain overnight so we can sunbathe in the day. And
that's the idea, exactly. Rain in the dark and sun in the day.
Exactly.
It never happens.
Perfect.
That's what you like.
Never happens. So Andy, we're going to zip you off, but hang around. Don't leave us. Stay lurking. Enjoy your Bladnoch, and we'll see you in a bit. He's off. Right, here we go. So, Nick, you have worked in whiskey for quite a while now, and I feel like, so Bladnoch was revived relatively recently in whiskey history terms. Tell us a bit about you and your career and how you've ended up at Bladnoch.
My career, so yeah, it's an interesting journey. I've not been in it as long as many people, so I consider myself halfway through a career, so to speak, but it's been interesting so far. So I joined Diageo in 2007, and I'd studied mechanical engineering before that. So I was looking at sports. Tennis rackets was the actual PhD that I studied in, and went to work. Tennis rackets was the PhD. So, and then you'll see the tenuous link in a minute. But Diageo, Johnny Walker's, Smirnoff's, there's a huge company, and the idea was to go in there from an engineering point of view to research whiskey casks. So the big barrels, the wooden casks that we make. And basically we asked, well, why did they lose the angel share? Can we stop that? Can we make them stronger and thinner, make them last longer, and can we design them? So that was my entrance in to whiskey.
I like it.
Yeah, it was a good entrance, and a lot of people say, how do you become master distiller or master blender? But it's never been by design. It's always been, that sounds good, let's go try that. I'll enjoy that. And that was the first entrance. And researching whiskey casks was the title. That sounded pretty interesting, so let's go and try that. And from that, you're surrounded by people, you're surrounded by the experts, and the people who know what a cask needs to do are the people who blend it. So you have to learn all that, and you're onto sensory panels, and that's how you understand how to nose and taste, and then you build those skill sets from there. And I was with Diageo for 8 years in Scotch, but also looked at those casks in bourbons and Canadian whiskies, and then I went to work with William Grants down in Girvan at the big grain distilling plant.
Oh my gosh, I love grain whiskey. Don't get me started. I'll go off for hours. But yeah, that's fun. And
I don't understand. I've never understood the stigma. I don't get that at all. I mean, Girvan, Cameron Bridge, there's some amazing single grains, and the pattern still fantastic. I just never understood the stigma myself. So worked in Girvan in brewing and distilling, so the opposite side of the fence, and worked there for probably about 13 months, 14 months. So very quick, but if you're going to learn about brewing and distilling, that's where you learn it. It was incredible to be part of that. And then, I got invited to apply to be master distiller at Macallan after a couple of years there. And, every move that I've made, everybody said, look, it's not, it's a good opportunity. You have to go for that. We're not going to hold you back. So great. And I went through and was master distiller at Macallan. Through that period, there's not much that we didn't change or do, or there were so many things that went along with that, and it was a privilege just to be part of it. And that role brought everything together. Led the team with understanding the stocks and how things mature and how that becomes final product, how stock allocations and the commercial side work, how you innovate and launch new products, how you build stocks for the future, how you build brands. And there were so many world records broken on the secondary market that was nothing to do with those, but you have to be part of it. And then obviously it was just a privilege just to be part of the building of that new distillery when it was opened. And then David called me and we had a chat, and this was a new adventure. This was something completely different. It had the credentials of why I wanted to move, and it had the vision, but it's not a big multinational, and it was that opportunity to see, well, can we do it all again at the opposite end of the brand's evolution, and that's where we are right now. So it was an opportunity to test myself again, really, is what drove me to Bladnoch.
I mean, it's absolutely incredible, and I have so many questions. So
that was about 5 minutes, and I didn't stop, so I apologise.
No, it's amazing. And actually, I don't even remember when I went up to Macallan for a preview of the distillery. I'm pretty sure I met you there and quizzed you a little bit then about whiskey making. But so that's your story. Tell us a bit about Bladnoch's story, because it's another saga all of its own, I feel.
Yeah. When you look at the history, I mean, like you said, it's had a bit of a turbulent history to say the least, but it's one of the oldest distilleries going. So 1817 was when it was founded. And there's a lot that goes in there. It changed hands a number of different times. Went through United Distillers at one point, and then became independently owned, and then were by the Armstrongs. And in 2009, it was mothballed. Still an active distillery from a point of view of a functioning site, but wasn't actually producing, but had lots of maturing stocks there. And then went into liquidation, and then David Pryor, our owner, kind of said, well, he wanted to take this on in 2015, so he acquired the distillery and the stocks, and then worked with him in McMillan, my predecessor, on basically say this needs to be a new distillery. It's an old distillery, but it needed new internal workings. So everything from the milling onwards, milling downstream, was reimagined, and everything was restarted in 2017. So we're on that journey. So I describe it as a brand new 200-year-old distillery. Is the way I
Which is
describe
amazing. It's amazing to have the heritage and the history, but also the newness, and to be riding that wave of kind of like new distilleries which are opening up, but with that on the site that's been making for so long. It's really fascinating. A question: did the Porteous mill remain?
But the what? Sorry.
The Porteous mill, is that not what they're called? The mills that last.
The Bobby mill.
The Bobby mill, yes.
Yes. So the Bobby mill, and the elevator and the grist bin, they remained. Everything downstream from that was new.
there are so many stories about, you know, them lasting for so long that the maker went out of business because no one ever needed the new one.
Pretty much. I mean, it was refurbished, but yeah, it's one of these bomb-proof things that just happen. To be fair, I'll probably walk in tomorrow now and it'll have a break.
No, we haven't.
Neil will be calling me up saying, "What the hell did you say?" So yeah, I mean, it's brand new, but it's got maturing stocks, which is why we're able to do a 14 and a 19, and so on and so forth. So we're able to build a brand while building the stocks over a longer period of time. So that was the attraction, really. Brand new to the distillery.
You can like jigsaw all the pieces together. It's fabulous. Yeah. Now, everyone has got stuck into the stram already while they've been listening, which I love. So Elle Sutton's getting honey on the nose and a hint of apple. Alistair's like, sorry?
Apple, yeah. These are all what I wrote down. I'm going to enjoy it now. You carry on.
That was so good. Fruity nose, predominantly a floral honey. We've got Steve saying apricots and peaches. Your Uncle Vanya, who I love, says hashtag stop grain stigma. Yes, please. Joe F, again, apples and honey. Steve is saying like sucrose-esque over honey for them. Graham's talking about grassy florals. David saying heather cut grass. Chris is also getting honey. Loads and loads. Oh, apple crumble and vanilla ice cream. Don't get me started on food already, people. Don't do it. I love this one from Joe. It smells like walking through a field on a hot day with rapeseed and wild plants on either side. Oh my gosh, yes, like a June day, basically.
Yeah.
Amazing. Toffee apple from James. Malcolm's getting cereal with some light florals, and Eddie's getting honeycomb, milk chocolate, orchard fruits, and a warming finish. Now, I have not had any yet. I've got FOMO. You're sipping. Everyone else is sipping. I'm going to pour it down. Tell me all about this whiskey. What have we got on our tasting list?
I'm actually very, very happy with some of those tasting notes. I mean, I've not even said a word. And the purpose of Vinaya is, the meaning of the word Vinaya is origin or home. And what we wanted to do, we've got a number of different products now, and a lot of them focus on the cask and what the cask does. And that's great. We've still got that story in here, but what we wanted to highlight was the distillery style as well as the cask. So it wanted to highlight everything that goes with the heritage that we just spoke about and allow us to talk about our home, our origin, and that's where Vinaya comes through as a word. So when we're hearing things like fruity, floral, the fresh cut grass, these are the descriptors that I use for our new make, and that's the distillery style that starts to come through. But with Vinaya, I also wanted to combine that with, I didn't want it just to be all distillery because we've got a massive commitment to our casks. Okay, so 95% of our casks are first fill, they're brand new. So we want to get that balance right. So although it's very fresh, refreshing is a good descriptor of the experience. All those floral notes, fresh cut grass, honey, lots of honey in there. I love the butterscotch and the honeycomb, creamy, those types of notes, malty. Great descriptors, but and on the palate, and I'm going to taste it.
I'm gonna have a taste too. Cheers, everyone! If you're like me, and have a taste of it. Yeah?
And bear in mind, this is at 46.7, so it's higher strength. Doesn't actually taste like 46.7. It's surprisingly thick coating on the palate. It's not you know the nose. You might think it's going to disappear, but it actually hangs about. You get that vanilla custard, I think someone mentioned, which is one of my favorite descriptors in the world. The honeycomb, the butterscotch, but you also get a richness. It doesn't feel thin. It's a nice rich dram that comes. A little bit of that richness comes from those sherry casks that we use, as well as the bourbon casks. So on the palate, it's very driven by the casks. All those vanillas, butterscotch, come from the American oak and the bourbons, and then that richness, a little bit of dried fruits come through for me. Probably a little bit of raisins, but only subtle, but very sticky on the palate. That starts to come from the European oak casks. So if you think about Vinaya, it gives that great articulation of the distillery style, plus those two great cask combinations and used in balance to give that light, refreshing, sweet dram. And that's overall the purpose of the reason, the rationale for Vinaya.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. Andrew Bowley has just gone, OMG, that's good. And I agree, the texture of it is like, I don't know, I'm getting a little bit of like a cinnamony kind of like gentle spicy heat.
It's like, it's not overpowering, it's only subtle. It's only subtle. Yeah. It's not like a big mouthful of spices. Yeah.
It's glorious. So a question from Colin. It doesn't state an age. How old is it roughly?
So I like to call these character-led whiskies, because as soon as we start to talk about the age, everyone's ears turn off and everything else is irrelevant. Which is why I call it character-led, because we're trying to tell that story of our home and the cask types. So there's a combination of ages, but we try not to talk about the actual age, because for us in this type of product, we talk about the character and the story. So that's what I like to focus on. There's a combination in there.
Cool. And will it be mostly from your new liquid or some older stocks, or how does that balance out?
A combination. Mainly older stock is in there, and I think it's one of the purposes of my role is to actually, unless we tell you, we would never know if it's younger stock or older stock, because there shouldn't be any difference. We shouldn't all of a sudden one day say, oh, the 10-year-old's gone from the old distillery to the new distillery, because the distillery is tuned to mimic the old way of doing it. So theoretically, and my job is to actually say, well, yeah, we made that switch 10 years ago and nobody noticed. That's if we do it right, that's the correct way of doing it. And unless we choose to say, actually, here's a single cask from the first year of release, then we would highlight it. But in terms of the overall makeup, we would never tell you. You should never theoretically know. If I'm doing my job right, you'd never know.
I like that. I like that analogy. It's making it seamless blend, which is what the whiskey tastes like. It's like, very flowing and seamless. Rich says that's a beautiful dram. You've got to be proud of it. And I hope you are, because it is gorgeous. We've got Eddie saying it's a lovely, a pleasant sipper, a very good start indeed. Graham gets a chocolate taste and a hint of floral, but he's getting a bit of spice on the finish. Stuart has got involved with water. So if you're new to drinking whiskey, definitely pop a couple of drops of water in. Remember, you can add more in, but you can't take it out, so don't glug it too much. Saying it really opens it up into more green apple and pear sweetness. Loads of comments, loads and loads of comments. Nikolai's getting lemongrass with a crack of black pepper. James is just, wow, it's good, which is great. This is all validated notes. And Sean, sweet sherry, more pronounced on the finish, oak, and then slightly drying. So yes, Andrew has said just buying a bottle now. Don't forget, if you like them, there is the pour and chips. Oh, can't speak. Pour and sip shot, tongue twister. But Nick, I have got some questions for you. This distillery is fascinating to me, and the whole process of bringing it back to life and matching like the kit. So getting the stills the same, getting the washbacks the same. What was that process like? Is it hard to do? I guess maybe you had some experience with the Macallan, going from upsizing from the small one to the new one.
To be fair, it was more, by the time I got to Bladnoch, all that had already happened. I inherited what Ian had. So, it's just to Ian's credit, nothing to do with me. And I'd love to say credit, but no. But when I remember the phrase, and you might remember it from when you came to Macallan, the phrase, a death mask was used. You might remember that being said. And basically it was to take that imprint of exactly what was in the old distillery and move it to the new one. Because although we might talk about water sources and various other things, the key is the size, the shape of the stills, the angles that you're hitting, your fermentation times, the levels of solids that you're pulling through, the temperatures that you're hitting in fermentation when you're hitting them, and that's where the cutting of the spirit at various cut points. That's the key thing. So you get the death mask, which was either like it or loathe it. That day. We went great and it went bad sometimes, but that phrase was quite accurate. And then you tune. I call it tuning the distillery to then meet that style, whether it's fermentation hours or looking at your cut points. That's when you really tune it after you set the whole thing up.
Amazing. So talk to us through, I've got some more comments, and if you've got questions for Nick as well, team, don't forget to pop them in. I mean, I have many a question, so I'm fine if I get to hog all the airwaves, but get involved, guys. In terms of cut points, there might be some people listening who are not really sure what that means and why they make a difference to the spirit. So just chat us through your thought process and what a cut is and why it's important.
So I might get a bit wavy here. I might start flinging arms around a little bit. So,
interpretive dance, bring it on.
I get props, okay? So I'll use my props. So when you're in the studio, you're basically making your wash after fermentation. And that's similar to a high-strength beer, okay? So we're coming off at about 8%, 7.5%, 8% alcohol. You're then putting it into a wash still. You're then boiling that up into a vapor, coming across, and you're condensing it through back into a liquid form. You then redo that, comes off at about 23-24% alcohol. Yeah. You then redistill that in the second time in the spirit stills, coming across again, same process from vapor to liquid. But this time we don't collect everything. We actually just take a certain cut depending on when we want to cut, at what strength it comes off at. So early on in the distillation, it's a higher strength alcohol because alcohol weighs less than water. So they come off first and the higher alcohols come off first. And we will then take, at a certain point, we will start to take the liquid for whiskey or for new make. And then we will again stop and stop that. And then that goes, that heart of the run is what it's called, goes to be filled into casks. And the heads and the tails are then recirculated for the next distillation. Now, depending on where you cut, yes, there's actual alcohol, ethanol that comes across, but there's a lot of other things that come through, higher alcohols, esters, and depending on when they come across, will depend on the style that you're going to try and pull out, basically, extract, cut. And that's what we mean by taking a cut.
I love it. I remember doing
I need a flip chart or a whiteboard or something like that. I'm hoping my props of still and condenser worked. As well as
I love it. We love geekery. We love it. Get out the flipboard if you want. I remember at WOCT, it's ingrained into you that distillation is about selecting not just the alcohol, but the flavors too, or there's other delicious things in there. So getting those out.
To put it into real life, it's the kettle that you've got at home. That's roughly what it is. And when the steam comes off, all we simply do is make that cooler and condense that back into the liquid. And then we just take, depending on what flavor we want, basically. So to put it in a real world context, it's a big kettle. Yeah,
it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So we've got a couple of questions. One of them easier, then the other one we're going to get geeky again. I'm going to go to Ali's question first. Where is the distillery? This is a Lowland distillery, right?
That's right. This is a Lowland distillery. It's the most southerly distillery. So I think it's, if you just draw a horizontal line, pretty much in England. I think it's further south than Newcastle. So it's in Dumfries and Galloway. It's actually in a place called Wigtonshire, which is about 30 miles inland from Stranraer, but it's in the Solway Firth, and it's a spectacular location, absolutely spectacular location. And on a good day, you could probably see Ireland from the distillery. So yeah, most southerly distillery, right down in that southwest point of Scotland.
Sounds glorious. I love the idea of looking across the water on a day like we've had today. Okay, everyone, hold on to your hats because Mike has asked the question. As well as cut points, you earlier mentioned angles in a still. What does that mean? How does that impact flavour?
Angles and still. So back to my props.
I love the props.
Okay.
Love the props.
I like the props. I don't think I've got another one. I need a pen. Let's do the pen.
It's getting serious. Oh, we've got scissors. Excellent.
That's still okay. I don't know if you can see that. So depending on, obviously, we're boiling this up and this is becoming hotter and turns into a vapor. And physics, things are heavier they're going to take more energy to come up across. So if we make the angle of the lie arm, which is this thing, before it hits the condenser, if we make that steeper, it makes it harder for things to come across. So if you make it shallower, it's easier. So again, that was the reference to the angles point.
I love it.
You're making things harder or easier to come across at certain points in the distillation is roughly what we're talking about there.
Yeah, and it's actually amazing when you think about some of the distilleries with smaller stills. I mean, Macallan has curiously small stills. That's got a very oily spirit because, you know, even the lazy oils that, you know, they can't be bothered to move. It doesn't, like, even they can get up and over. When you've got
because they're short and the angle of the arm is like that. So once they're up here, they can get down. They're not refluxing, as you call it, back. They're not going back. Yeah. So there's numbers of different ways you can force it to do certain things, i.e., more to stay in the stills or more to come across. So you can do it that way.
I love it. I love it. It's distillation school with Nick. There we go. It's not just making whiskey. We're learning about it.
Mainly in the cask side, but I think I'm doing all right with the distilling descriptions with my scissors and bottles.
I'm here for it. So we've had a few more comments come in. Malcolm, viscous liquid gold that coats the mouth. I love that. Steve saying it would definitely go as an after dinner whiskey. I agree. And Sarah saying it makes her want dessert, which I also agree with. It's absolutely.
I agree with that. For me, also think about, I mean, I love so there's the fundamental descriptors of it tastes like vanilla or custard or something that everyone knows. The descriptor of the experience is great, walking through a field or whatever it might be. And I remember you guys saying at the beginning, there's no wrong answers. And if a descriptor is, this reminds me of when I used to sit with my dad in the sun. Well, I don't know what that is, but that's a great descriptor because you just remind you of something. So there are no wrong descriptors. Also, I like the experience, and I think of it tastes like this, but on a hot summer day like today, this is working great. Come back in December when it's cold, I'd much rather have a sherry dram, but think about the occasion and when and the temperature of the room, all that goes into if you're enjoying it and what I pick was a dram as well.
I absolutely love it. Oh my gosh, Nick, that's been incredible. Thank you so much for talking us through it. Thank you for coming and hanging out with us for a bit. And if you can, please do stay and we'll come back at the end. And if you've got any more questions for Nick about Bladnoch, about whiskey making, anything you like, keep them coming in and we'll have a chat again at the end. I'm going to bring Andy back. Where is he? Here he is. How was that? How was your Bladnoch dram?
That's how my Bladnoch dram was.
You spelt it.
No, a 3 centiliter dram. I've still finished it, but I mean, yeah, that was actually, like I said earlier, my first time trying Bladnoch. Weirdly, and I have to say I absolutely love it. The mouthfeel for me was really the kind of thing that came through for me. It's wonderful kind of viscous, oily, creamy kinds of mouthfeel that I absolutely loved. Wonderful stuff.
Great. Glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fabulous stuff. So Nick, we'll say bye to you for now, but yeah, hopefully come back at the end rather. And we are going to continue with our little Scotch journey. So see you in a bit. Cheers, Nick. There we go. So that was amazing. That was fabulous.
Absolutely. Wonderful dram to start. A lot of you had said what a great dram that was to start. And I'm not saying we're getting better, but we've got some more great drams for you as well. And Nick was talking, so we're talking about one of the most southerly distilleries in Scotland. We're actually going to go to one of the most northern ones now in Balblair. So please pour yourself your Balblair dram whilst I ramble on about it to you. Let it sit in the glass. I do like to let whiskey sit, and sometimes I use, like even a 15-year-old could take another maybe 10-15 minutes to really open up. So I'm going to speak at you all for 10-15 minutes now whilst your whiskey opens up. No, feel free to drink whilst I'm speaking. Don't be shy.
I was going to say, I've obeyed you so far in that I've poured my dram. I can't promise I'm going to have the dram sat there for this whole time because now my taste buds want more.
I'm sure the listeners and viewers are all the same. But anyway, so Balblair for me is a really interesting distillery, and I don't think it's one that's been shouted about that much in the past. Bit of a minnow in terms of people recognise it as making up most of what was the Ballantyne's blend, and not really as a single malt distillery. But now things are changing. A lot of people will say one of the things that really would change is that was the fact that Balblair was featured as kind of one of the distillery locations in Angelshire. If anyone's seen that film by Ken Loach, wonderful.
I love that film so much. It's awesome.
Exactly, which I think is a great film for anybody looking to look to want to learn more about whiskey. But Balblair was the location for the auction that took place in the film, and that kind of garnered a bit more interest, let's say, in the distillery. But you know, before that was kind of associated with part of the Ballantyne's blend. Now, Balblair is one of also the oldest working Scotch distilleries. It was built in 1790. It then moved and was rebuilt in 1895. Now, interestingly, it's built in Edderton, and they kind of moved it, which is in Rossshire, and they kind of moved it closer to the railway station for obvious reasons, kind of ease of transport, ease of bringing the coal in. But the water source was so good in the original distillery location that they decided to keep that water source, which was a burn called the Old Den. I'm sorry if my pronunciation is wrong there. It's absolutely guaranteed to be wrong, so please. But to this day, they still use that water source, which does go to show quite how important water is in the production of whiskey. And some distilleries absolutely maintain the water source being one of the most important things. So they've still used that water source to this day. It's owned now, it's been owned by quite a few different people. It was mothballed back in the day, but now it's owned by in-house distillers who have, I have to say, this is a real kind of touchy subject within the Balblair range. So like Glenrothes as well, they used to release Balblair just in vintages, which I have to say I loved. So it would be in a date. So I've actually got a bottle of 1991 Balblair up there. And in 2019, they changed that. So we've now got a new range, which is 12, 15, 18, and 25. Some people don't like that. Some people do like that. I think it's to keep up with the industry because we're dealing so much with age statements at the moment. And Balblair only really release age statements. They're not really released much kind of non-age statement whiskey or much finishing whiskey. But I mean, I did love the vintages, and I loved the vintages with Glenrothes. But if you want to get some of those vintages as they were, it would be on the secondary market now. Now, it's a Highlands distillery, and it's kind of, you know, it's got a lot of characteristics that kind of classically kind of Highlands, a bit spicy, creamy, oily, and citrus notes as well. Now, funnily enough, we were talking earlier about Macallan and the still shapes at Macallan. Now, Balblair is actually very similar to Macallan. It uses kind of very small, fat, stumpy. Yeah, exactly. I haven't got the scissors with me to really kind of, and this is from the glass that Nick had, but that, like Nick was saying, creates a much heavier and denser spirit and less reflux. We talk about the reflux with the kind of the vapors rising and then kind of those heavy ones dropping back into the copper pot. Now, if you compare it to like its most kind of, let's say its nearest distillery is Glenmorangie, which notoriously has the thinnest, most slender and tall stills. What's the difference here? Well, Balblair are trying to kind of get those kind of heavier kind of elements from the whiskey into the new make spirit, whereas Glenmorangie is much taller, so those spirits kind of it encourages more reflux, as Nick was talking. So you get a much more light, floral, and delicate spirit. So it's kind of similar to Macallan, and obviously Nick might partly be at fault for anybody who is having to pay for Macallan over the odds on the secondary because it's now got so good. But these are part of the reasons why the Balblair spirit is much kind of denser, leathery, and kind of oilier than, let's say, its nearest neighbour in Glenmorangie. So even though they're both kinds of Highland distilleries, it does go to show how the shape of the stills is such an important thing in the kind of in the production of the new make spirit, and it can completely change absolutely everything. So it's not a huge distillery. We're kind of talking 1.3, 1.4, I think, million litres of whiskey output a year. 3 stills, 1 wash, 2 stills. So I mean, let's get into this now.
Yes. So 2 things before we continue. One fun fact, one question. Fun fact, I don't know if anyone saw Glenmorangie doing a campaign. I think it was raising money for giraffe conservation because their stills are the same height as a giraffe's neck on average, which is amazing. Very, very cool. And then a question from Sergio before we got on the tasting. Is it fine to use the same glass for the next taste? Just clean it up with water? Yeah, just give it a swoosh, give it a rinse. You're fine. Crack on.
Absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And actually, I would say that Balblair is such an old distillery that it has the first ledger entry dated back in 25th of January, 1800, which is penned by John Ross himself, who set up this distillery, which reads, "Sailed to Dave Kilcaddy at Ardmore, 1 gallon of whiskey at 1.8 pounds. Wow. If only
1.8 pounds. Sorry, I'm looking over here because one of the cats has just appeared, probably about to make an
appearance again. But I was going to say, if it was like that these days, we would all be drinking a hell of a lot more whiskey. But maybe that's not good.
Yeah, sip, don't gulp. Sip, don't gulp.
Don't gulp. Sip, don't gulp. So what are you saying? This is the 15-year-old. just getting into that stage. This has been matured in ex-bourbon casks and then finished in ex-sherry casks. Nothing has just kind of been revealed about which sherry. We're probably talking about Oloroso here, because when we mention sherry, we usually just talk about Oloroso unless it's kind of specified the other type of sherry. But I think this is a finish in first fill sherry cask rather than a secondary maturation. They don't specify how long the finish is for, but maybe we can kind of use our detective work to kind of see if there's much more kind of sherry coming through, if it's been a longer finish in the kind of in the sherry butts. But anyway, Christy, what are you thinking about this one?
Well, I've been sitting here having a little nose of it. It's really, really gorgeous. I feel like Joe F has a really good tasting note. It says it smells oily with tea bags and honey at first sniff. And I'm actually there with the tea. I feel like there is a bit of a tea note. There's something dry. It's not as full-on fruity as perhaps I was expecting, but I really like it. We've got other things, baked red apples and custard. And Chris saying it's a fab dram. We've got honey, fruity and ginger, apple pie and oak. It's kind of, it is in that ballpark, I think. For me, when we're talking about what is the finishing maturation situation, I do feel like you're a bit of a detective, like when you nose and taste something. It is like trying to suss out what's happened in this whiskey's past. It's like you're interrogating it, but in a much more pleasant way than the actual interrogation room. But for me, I'm getting a
you whiskey, reveal your
whiskey. So yeah, I think it's probably a shorter sherry finish to my nose anyway.
It's definitely not a sherry bomb by any stretch, and obviously it wouldn't be, not being kind of whole maturation in sherry cask, but there's a very detectable sherry. It's just not like overtly a sherried dram. I think for me, I'm getting loads of kind of dark chocolate notes there and lots of prunes in particular, which I always get with any whiskey that's been finished in sherry. And I'm loving the color of this. This is non-chill filtered, natural color. It's an absolutely wonderful color. But yeah, what are you guys getting? Have we gone through some of the tasting notes here?
We've gone through some. Sergio's got quite a lot to say. I think we're talking about how much you pour into taste. It's like the whole lot. I mean, it's up to you guys, seriously. It depends. In all practicality, like it is quite fun to save some to compare with the others in the box, but it's your whiskey. Enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, someone said notes of Cranachan, very Scottish tasting note there. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Someone can correct me there. Baked red apples, custard on the nose, absolutely on the red apples. I'm definitely. Someone else said Bakewell tart, which I'm absolutely agreeing with there. What about yourself, Christy?
Yeah, I think I've just had a little sneaky taste. I had to have a sneaky taste. And for me, the sherry comes through much more on the palate. I'm getting a bit of licorice. It feels a bit like slightly dusty in a good way. Like a burn, like the souffle top kind of a vibe. Treacle, Sarah's just said, yes, absolutely treacle. Creamy fudge. Someone's getting Bakewell tart. Now, for me, that almondy vibe from a Bakewell tart is like a key indicator of a sherry cask influence. It just lines up like that for me. I'm laughing a little bit at Alistair, who's lowered the tone, but I'm going to go there. Dog's just let off next to me, so that spoiled the nose somewhat. What is it with animals and whiskey tasting? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely lowering the tone. But I suppose if you can still get some notes, that shows your kind of nosing is getting even stronger, and not even the dog's farts will kind of distract you from the whiskey nose. But yeah, I'm getting on the finishes a bit oakier. They can taste the kind of 15 years in casks. And there's a spiciness to it as well. There's kind of a star anise kind of spiciness as well to it. And like you were saying, maybe it's the licorice as well. Yeah, absolutely wonderful stuff.
It's really good. It's really lovely. And I think people were saying earlier that discovering these whiskies like the Bladnoch and the Balblair, this is the biggest joy for me of these kinds of tastings. It's like there's distilleries that you don't always see every single day. And now we get to taste them together. And I feel absolutely spoiled, quite frankly. It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, if you go on, you only need to go on Instagram or just look around. And obviously we've been speaking about Macallan, and obviously Macallan is everywhere. And Ardbeg, there's pictures of lineups of Ardbeg and Macallan collections. Look what I got. But there's much less about stuff like Balblair and maybe Bladnoch. And then obviously we're going to Glenfarclas, maybe not so much, which Glenfarclas does go still for quite a lot on the secondary market. But Balblair in particular, I mean, we're talking about a wonderful distillery that's, kind of one of the oldest working distilleries in Scotland. And it's not really been one of the kind of at the forefront of the kind of Instagram kind of whiskey lifestyle. So, and I love the design of the bottles, I have to say about that. I wish I could reach that one up there, which is right at the top. They're kind of short, stumpy bottles, and they're really, really unique and kind of memorable. You really know that that's a Balblair bottle.
They're really lovely. I mean, obviously time is running away with us. It's somehow 8 and we've still got a whole nother whiskey to taste. Shall we scuttle on to dram number 3 for the day?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got dram number 3. I said vanilla custard on that, and that is absolutely there for me in that kind of most desserty kinds of note. Oh yeah, absolutely wonderful stuff. Those are 2 really, really good drams, and we're going now to what I would say is just an absolute kind of classic, like the Glenfarclas, from one of the kind of most, you know, just a classic whiskey distillery.
So Glenfarclas for me, while everyone's sort of pouring their 3rd and final dram for the night, people might know that I'm into running. I love running a lot. I run all kinds of distances, and I love running on the hills. And if anyone has not heard of the Dramathon, go and look it up. So I ran the first one in 2017. And this is the only time I've actually been to Glenfarclas. It starts at Glenfarclas Distillery. So you go up over the hill, down up the Spey Valley. You go past so many distilleries. You don't drink the whiskey until the end, I will add. But you go past, obviously, the other side of the river from Macallan. There's so many. There's Aberlour. And you finish going up past Balvenie to Glenfiddich. And I love this distillery because it just reminds me of that day. It was such a fun day, and fingers crossed going back to do it this year, it will just be amazing. And what I think about, oh sorry, what were you going to say, Andy?
I was just wondering if you had like a dram of Glenfarclas to kind of start you off on the right foot on the Dramathon.
I mean, there was definitely a few drams at the end of the Dramathon.
Sorry, where did it finish again?
It finishes at Glenfiddich.
At Glenfiddich, okay, so there were definitely some Glenfiddich.
Yeah, and you go past Cardew as well. I'm just remembering them. And my favourite thing, and this always reminds me of Glenfarclas, because when you nose it, it's so sherry. This one especially, like it's just, you know, full of those really rich dark fruits, Christmas cake vibes, all of this. But that's what you smell when you run past a warehouse. So they didn't have mile markers. They had like, obviously when you went past the distillery and you could smell the warehouses before you saw them. And I'd be like, it's a whiskey, and that's what this whiskey reminds me of. This
is a marathon that I might want to partake in.
I really recommend it. It's really, really good.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think Glenfarclas is an absolutely kind of classic whiskey distillery. And one thing I say about Glenfarclas is, and on the start of my whiskey journey, is that they kind of release very high age statement whiskey at decent prices. I mean, it's still family owned. It's still moderately independent. I think it's totally independent, except
it's the Grant family, not off of William Grant's, different one.
Exactly. But I mean, I think that's an amazing thing, and that's one thing why people love them. Glenfarclas does go a lot for the secondary market as well, because there's lots of collectible Glenfarclases if we're talking about the family casks. So if you ever do have a birth date, I've been desperate to find the 1987, giving away my age there, to find the 1987 Glenfarclas, but it's just too expensive. But I have to say that Glenfarclas introduced me to whiskey by being able to afford kind of a 21-year-old, you know, or a 25-year-old, not at kind of outrageous price points. And I think that's one of the great things about Glenfarclas, and why a lot of people have it as their kind of gateway dram. And for me, the 15 was one of my gateway drams, to be honest with you, one of those ones that kind of got me into whiskey.
Yeah, I love the 15-year-old. I feel like, I don't know what it is about it. So I was very lucky recently to join Glenfarclas. We did a tasting of their core range. It was their 185th anniversary. So they've got a new bottling out for that. But this was like, you know, the 10, the 15, and then 18, 21.
Is that the 105 that they've released, like kind of again for the 85th birthday?
It's a separate one, the 185th one. It's a different, it is a new expression. But what I loved about it was, and this is where I think we get very caught up on age statements. So 15-year-old whiskey is like a significant age. I feel like really lucky to be drinking this right now. But for me, that whole range was great, and they all shone in different ways at different ages. And you could tell they were like, you know, cousins that were from the same distillery. But what makes the 15-year-old amazing for me just wasn't there on the older ones. It was something very different. So older isn't necessarily better. Like if you like something that's maybe got a little bit more vibrancy to it, perhaps, then, or it's a bit more energetic, then maybe actually younger whiskies will be what you really love.
I think we've discussed this before, but I have to say some of my favourite whiskies recently have been younger whiskies. I mean, this one you can't buy for love nor money at the moment, the Kilkerran 8. You know,
ooh, yes.
Whiskey, sherry, totally. I mean, look at that colour. Look at that colour. But anyway, you know, that's been one of my favourite whiskies, an 8-year-old whiskey. So you're absolutely right. We do get caught up on age statements. You know, is it better if it's older? No, it is definitely not. If you want something more vibrant, youthful, energetic, like you're saying, brash, bold, the Ardbeg Wee Beastie is 5 years old and it's a great dram. But I have to say that Glenfarclas is a good way to be able to try bottles of kind of higher age statements at a good price, because, you know, 21-year-old whiskey is usually so expensive and unaffordable for a lot of people. And I don't know what everyone's wallet situation is like or price point, but, you know, at Glenfarclas, they're kind of more to the reasonable end of higher age statement prices.
I'm just going back to this on the nose. I am going to drink it in a sec, but just to read through some of your notes, it's getting almost coffee-like for me now, which is another bit of a sherry thing. So DS is saying lovely colour, Australian muscat, ginger on the nose, pineapple on the palate, sweet fruity finish. Louis, Glenfarclas will be my 100th different whiskey, so hoping for something special. I mean, a century of different whiskies? That's incredible. I feel like you need a round of applause almost. It's like we're in the cricket or something.
100 that you've tried or 100 that you own?
That's a good question. Let us know. That's a good question.
There's always like a real strong toffee element that I get to Glenfarclas in a really good way, and it's in all the Glenfarclases that I try, even if they're not sherried. But I mean, a lot of what Glenfarclas do is sherry cask influence.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now I'm also questioning what the plural of Glenfarclas is. Glenfarclas? Don't know. Anyway, I digress. This always happens. Eddie saying Christmas pudding and brandy butter spritzed with furniture polish on the nose. I love it. That's such a good tasting note. David's getting oranges, toffee, caramel. Steve is saying it's a super subtle nose. Interesting, but no, fair. Michael, love this dram. We're going to do a full flight from Glenfarclas. Can't wait. This was the first bottle of whiskey I ever purchased. Yes, and this is it, celebrating old favourites as well as new ones. Green tea is green, much milder on the nose than the Glenfarclas and the Balblair or even the Bladnoch. More cut grass, meadow, floral. Spilled tea. So we've got green tea is green and spilled tea now. I'm loving this. It's very sophisticated, they found. Question for you, Andy, from Colin. How does Glenfarclas 105 compare to the other Glenfarclases?
Now that's a really, you know, a lot of people when they first want to buy a sherry bomb will usually head towards Glenfarclas 105 because it's one of the most famous ones, and I used to love that one. I do think it gets compared often to the Abuna, the Balblair Abuna, as two of the most kind of let's say, you know, easily accessible sherry bombs. I don't think it's as good as the Abuna, and that's just me. I think the Abuna is one of the best sherry bombs out there, regardless of what everyone says about the old batches being way better. Glenfarclas 105 isn't released in batches. It's kind of, whereas the Abuna is. So there's that difference. I still think it's a wonderful dram, and I think it's a great way to get into really heavily sherried whiskey. But I actually prefer the Glenfarclas 15. So personally, if I were to buy one of the two, I would buy the 15. Or the 17, which you can get really.
Here we go.
Hello. A Glenfarclas fan, I assume.
Yeah, she likes a bit Glenfarclas. No, that's a really good explanation, I think, of it. And yeah, and as well, I think it's bottled at higher ABV as well, right? And then Glenfarclas Day is the 105th day of the year, which I also like.
I think the 105 is bottled at an outrageous. Very, very high ABV. I don't know.
It may even be 105 proof, possibly. I feel like I should know this.
Yeah. But I mean, the Abuna will vary if you're into that. Like it's batch, so again, it will vary by which release it's been. So it could be released at 60, 62, 58. It depends on the release. But I know that Glenfarclas 105 isn't released as a batch. Susan Thurston asking if this is a sherry bomb. I mean, yeah, I mean, for me,
I feel like it is. I feel like we need like a sherry bomb klaxon, like an alarm to go off, and we can declare them sherry bombs between us.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I've got to say, it's a very cliched way to describe a sherry bomb, but when we talk about memories, this one is my Christmas dram. It has just got all those Christmas memories for me: the mince pies, the Christmas cake, the brandy butter, the sherry, the Oloroso, and this one is really for me, you know, just a wonderful kind of memory of Christmas. If I could drink a dram at Christmas, it would absolutely be Glenfarclas 15.
Yes, it's so Christmassy. Now, Louis come back to us. Cheers. 100 different that I've tried. I wish I owned 100. But I just did some quick maths, and I think this is right. It's basic maths. It should be. So Pour and Sip started in September, and we're now June. So I think that's 10 months. So if you've been a member of Pour and Sip since the start, you would have tried 50 just in the Pour and Sip boxes.
Sorry, for how many months is that?
I think so. September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June.
10 months, 10 more months, and we're all going to be like Louis with our 100th dram tried.
It's incredible. Fabulous. Right. It's 8:20 somehow. I have no idea how this has happened, but there we go. Shall we bring Nick back and have a last little chat for the last sort of 5-10 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, were you asking me if I wanted that to happen? I thought you were kind of saying you were going to bring Nick back. I was like, yeah, let's bring Nick.
I was like, Andy, shall we bring Nick back? We'll bring him back. Whether Andy wants to chat with Nick or not, we'll bring him back. Here he is. I feel like there's some beef going on or something. This is how rumours start.
I'm very pleased to welcome Nick back.
Thank you. That's good, Jeff. Good listening.
I mean, I feel like Scotch whiskey, I feel like a lot of the time people are like, world whiskey is amazing. There's so much stuff coming, so many new producers. And this is so true. But there's so much happening in Scotch right now. We can never, ever think that Scotch is boring or not changing and doesn't develop. I think the 3 drams this evening have been amazing. I don't know, what do you think about the state of Scotch at the moment, Nick?
Exactly as you just said, there's so much going on every aspect. Pick an aspect, whether it's capacities are going up, whether it's innovation in casks, whether it's new distilleries from old distilleries, whether it's growing distribution across the global markets. There's not much that's not going like this. So it's a great time to be part of it, and it's going to get even more fun, I think, over the next few years.
Absolutely. I think have you tried these nosing these if you haven't finished your Balblair yet?
I was comparing them earlier, and I don't know, like, when you're on the sort of whiskey creation side, Nick, I think if you're, well, and for Andy as well, when you're trying to wake up your nose and your palate a little bit, actually comparing them really like highlights the massive differences between them. And I think for somebody who's getting into whiskey fairly early on, that's a really great way to start to train your nose.
I mean, I would always say, I mean, it was great to get you on camera and you'd already finished the Bladnoch, which was great. But with the tasting, I always say to everybody, I'll take you through it when I've got 3 drams, 4 drams. Always leave a little bit from the first one and then go back to it after the last one. And it will be completely different to what you thought it was in the beginning. And like you said, just nosing and comparing, there will be massive differences just within the 3, huge differences.
I mean, the Balblair for me has changed so much.
Yeah.
It's just
when you add in water, you add in a drop at a time, and it will change with every single drop. And that's what I do in the sample room. You know, I'll have X amount of samples out. I'll run through them at cask strength, but then I'll also add water to see how they'll all perform with and without water. So yeah, it's amazing the differences in just. You start off with the same starting point. The malt was the same, the yeast, the distillations were the same, the cask was the same. They sat next to the same place, each other in the warehouse, and then they're completely different.
Yeah,
it's amazing. That's all. It never ceases to amaze me, that bit.
It's genuinely incredible. And when single cask whiskey is a great example. You mentioned earlier you might do like a single cask release from the first year at some point, but they really are totally individual. I think that it's amazing, absolutely outstanding how that can be.
Yeah. And that's what we do. So when I say I've got all the samples out, if something's done something special or unique or really stood out for that cask type, then I'll ring fence it as a single cask, and that will go into our single cask program. And that's how we've got 5 single casks every year. We also do a little bit of engaging with our fans, and we actually propose 3 something similar to this, and we actually say I won't describe what these samples are, and then we'll have a vote, and whichever one the guys want, then that's the one we'll bottle. And you get a great discussion like this, but it does show 3 different samples, and the group will be split. There'll be arguments, there'll be all kinds of stuff. But back to your point, there is no right or wrong answer. There just isn't.
We haven't gone to the arguments yet for this evening. We do ask people what their favourite dram is, so I'm going to put that out there now, and then everyone can argue.
Everyone clearly knows the drill because a lot of people have already commented and said their favourite dram of the night.
Yeah, it's good to keep them coming in. So we've got a question for you from Daniel, and I'm not actually familiar with this, so I hope this is an okay question to ask. Can Nick tell us something about the Waterfall series?
Wow, okay, he's got that far. So the water, I might need some more props, if that's all right.
Ah, okay.
So the Waterfall series is a concept. If you go on my Instagram, okay, there's a whiteboard diagram of what I actually drew at the brainstorm. And basically what I said was, let's take enough volume for 5,000 bottles. Okay, and it was the start of also sherry puncheons, or sherry butts, and bourbon casks. So we made a batch of 5,000 bottles. Take 1,000 bottles of those off and bottle that. That's year one, and then you take that back, the remaining 4,000, recast that into a different cask type based on your tasting notes and how you thought it was. Another year, take the 4,000 out, take another 1,000 for the collectors, and that's year two. And then you've got to decide which cask is next for the 3,000. And the point being, it's like an elongated Solera system. I just don't know where it ends up. So I don't know the next cask type until we've got it out and nosed it and said, no, that's gone a bit too spicy. I want to do something with a dessert wine cask to round it. I don't know the answer. So it's a good opportunity for everyone to learn and come along a journey. Over the next 5 years, we're into year two now, and it waterfalls down into 1,000 bottles every year.
Absolutely fascinating. The cat is now back again. She wants more whiskey. So on that and on maturation, I have another question. I have 10,000 questions. This always happens. Then we talk for hours. Are there any cask types that you'd like to play around with that you haven't yet?
Constantly playing around with them. I just tell you what we're doing. I like to describe it as building a treasure chest. So we've got our standard stuff. We'll fill 40%, 45% first fill bourbon, and the remainder would be first fill wine variants, whether it's wines or sherries. But I'm always open to the innovation stuff. So some dessert wine casks, some Japanese oak casks, lots of different things, because I might not be in this chair when someone gets them. I'm the person who laid all this down is not here. I'm just fronting it. So I like to say we lay a treasure chest down for the next people who come along. And I think that's half of the romance of Scotch is it's 200 years old now for Bladnoch, and it'll be another 200 years, and I'm just keeping this chair warm. So yes, very interested in things. I might lay them down, but I might not present them.
Are you hinting there at any future releases coming up? Yes.
If you look at the waterfall, I mean, that's a great way. It'll show you that we can move things, we can change things. We might try something different. Point I don't know, and it's a way of engaging with everyone and telling everyone what we're doing as we're doing it.
I mean, I've seen some mental casks being used at the moment of wines that I've never heard of in my life. Glenallachie have recently there, and Tomatin as well. I recently was on a tasting with some wines. I was like, I've not heard of these wines. One was Sauternes. A lot of us know Sauternes in the whiskey industry. It's often used. But something I can't even remember them actually now. Monzambédic, something like that, and a River Sauternes, something like this. And it was kind of crazy wines being used. So there's so much going on in the Scotch industry and so much experimentation. So sometimes people can end up being left behind, or there's distilleries like, I don't know, Balblair, who tend to kind of stick to their goals and they kind of don't do these kinds of things. And I find that's great because it's like putting on an old pair of jeans. I always know what I'm getting. With Balblair, it's kind of really interesting time in the Scotch industry.
I mean, and that's a great thing because, we talk about the peat stuff. I remember you guys talking at the beginning. That's great. Some people won't like peat, and that's fine. There's so much that I genuinely think, even when somebody says, I don't like whiskey, I think there's a whiskey out there with a serve for everyone.
100%.
I don't like whiskey means I don't like food.
Yes.
There's something there. We'll just have to find it for you, whether it's Lowland, Highland, Island, water, no water, cast. There's so much there. I just think there's a whiskey for everyone.
I agree.
I don't like whiskey. It tends to be something somebody usually says that they've had a bad experience when they were younger from whiskey.
Yeah, a massively peated one. It's a real extreme, and they think all whiskey's like that.
Or like the first whiskey I tried was a Lefroy 10 cask strength, and I was just like, that's grim. And it's like, okay, but you've not tried all the other kind of types of whiskey. And there's that smoky stuff, and it's like, oh, not all whiskey is smoky. So
people try and go from drinking gin and tonic to, like, say, a massive Islay. Obviously, that's a tough transition unless you're drinking smoky gins. Where actually something that that's light, fruity, and works well as a highball, great, 100%.
I've got to say, I think that the Bladnoch tonight is an absolute kind of whiskey that would change people's opinions because it's kind of refreshing dram. If you can get a refreshing dram, you're saying like summer's day, and we were saying about whiskey having a time and place. That Glenfarclas to me is all Christmas. Yeah. As someone actually said earlier, they were like, "This isn't whiskey; it's sherry. It's Christmas." Like, there are a lot of people who say that about sherry bomb whiskies. Like, not becoming whiskey anymore. But I mean, for me, that's just Christmas. And it's just
100%. I mean, even within our range, I can guarantee you, I will not be drinking Vinaya on Christmas Day.
Yeah,
I will be drinking our 14-year-old sherry, 100%, because it's a different time. Similarly tonight, I probably wouldn't drink the 14 because this is where I'm at tonight. It's the refreshing side. So the experience and the occasion, 100% plays into everything.
It's actually, funny enough, refreshing is not a word I often use with whiskey. To be honest,
46.7%. It's high.
Exactly. But that really, for me, it is really refreshing. It's kind of crisp.
It's awesome. We've got so many comments coming, by the way, and there's lots of love. So we've got all three of these are getting bought, but the Bladnoch was my favourite. That was from Gareth. David saying Balblair was the one we're going on the shelf. Glenfarclas from Jeremy. Steve, 100% Bladnoch. Your Uncle Vanya, Bladnoch was a great surprise to me. I've tried the other two before and still Bladnoch. Bladnoch was the winner for me tonight. I've got a bottle in my pour and sip basket to grab at the end of the tasting. That's from Rich. Lucky Rich, he's on the shopping spree. Owen's on the Bladnoch, Sean's on the Glenfarclas, followed by the Bladnoch. David's on Balblair. Alistair says Bladnoch, but loving all three. Glenfarclas for me. And a really lovely comment from Ian. Tonight has flown by. My favourite's the Glenfarclas, but all three have been excellent. This is why pour and sip is so good. You get to taste whiskey you would never normally be exposed to, which I love. I love this. Like, they get to taste things like this all alongside each other. Chris, I think Bladnoch for me, but I really like the Glenfarclas. Might have to get a bottle for Christmas. Joe, Bladnoch, but Glenfarclas for Christmas Day. Loads and loads of comments.
Are you just reading all these out because I'm on the call? With these
no, I'm reading them as they're there. It's good. It's really, really good.
We'll skew the result here.
Mike says it sounds like it could be another expensive month. Which is true. And this is how amazing whiskey is, right? Like, and this is what I love about the whiskey industry. I think if you love whiskey, you love different distilleries, you love the flavor that's offered by different ones. Someone said to me once that whiskey drinkers were a fickle bunch, and I think that's a good thing. Like, why stick to just one when there's so much beautiful stuff out there?
I mean, you do get loyalty towards certain distilleries. Anyone who's looking at my backdrop will know the one that I kind of have some kind of loyalty to.
You're a Springbank fan, let's face it.
Springbank in pour and sip. Message to the pour and sippers. But I do think that, you know, we're so I think whiskey fans at the moment are so willing to experiment and kind of want to try it and make that from as many different distilleries as possible and really educate themselves about whiskey. That's why I think it's such an amazing time for whiskey at the moment. You think how many clubs there are, Instagram accounts there are, YouTube channels there are, and people are really wanting to kind of just get as much as they can, try as much as they possibly can, because whiskey is so different, and just so different distilleries all taste different. And you know, I don't think you get that as much. I don't want to upset anyone with other alcohol types in as much as you do with whiskey, to be honest with you. Other spirits, not wine. We're not talking about wine.
We are a passionate bunch, that is for sure. We love it.
Ian Jambo Rain saying, compared to the price of the Abuna, the Glenfarclas 15 seems like great value for money, although the Abuna is superb. 100%. The Abuna has got so expensive in recent years that a lot of people are being priced out of it. And I think the Glenfarclas 15 is absolutely value for money and will run the Abuna next to it. So 100%, this is your sherry bomb whiskey.
Amazing. I cannot believe where the evening has gone. How is it after 8:30 already? I don't understand, but it's been so great. Nick, thank you enormously for coming and joining us and for sharing all of your incredible whiskey and distilling knowledge with us.
Thank you. It's been good fun. I enjoyed that.
And thank you for your scissors.
I'll now be famous. I'll send it. You can have for your next one.
There'll be a meme for you.
Next
scissors go. Try to explain stills.
It's been fabulous.
As long as people understand distilling just that little bit more, then
it's great. It's great.
It'll be in the WSCT diagrams before.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. It's been an absolute blast. It's honestly such a joy to just geek out with everyone. Absolutely love it. And Andy, always great to catch up with you as well.
Absolutely. And great to chat to you, Nick. Great to chat to you, Christy, as always. And hopefully one day some of us can be in person doing this and be tasting together in person. Fingers crossed.
I hope that time is coming. I remember, I mean, people who've joined Pour and Sip recently may not remember these days back in September, October, when we did tastings in person in the studio. Imagine that.
We are going to be going back to that at some point soon. So
I really can't wait. I really can't wait.
Fingers crossed.
So yes, if you can, resist your other 2 drams until the 17th of June, when we'll be back again with some more guests and some more chit chat for our rye duo, which will be really fun. Obviously, if you can't wait, you can crack them open and have a sneak peek. We'll allow it. We'll allow it. But yeah, this has been such a great evening. Enjoy your drams. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we will be back soon.
Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Take
bye-bye.
care, all. Bye.
Bye-bye.